Thanks, everybody. Wrapping up today, I guess. I wanted to talk to you today. Like she introduced me, I'm Robert Dickerson, Director of Product Innovation and Strategies. And what I wanted to share with you today is just some of the information we've learned talking with customers and how they can protect the infrastructure and the things that they're doing within their organization. And introduce to you Zero Trust, if you're not familiar, and some of the strategies. And then I also want to talk about some of the organizations we work with, the challenges that they face. We talked about this human side of it, which I think really factors into my presentation as well, into the things that they face. So just a little bit about VirnetX. We are a publicly traded company. We were founded in 2005. We have a number of patents that were originally developed for the intelligence community around encrypted communications, secure communications. And then we have a couple of different products that we call Gabriel around secure communication tools and zero trust strategies. And we have a number of different customers and partners in different spaces: healthcare, finance, legal, government. And we license those technologies to companies to integrate into their products and services as well. So the threat is real, right? I wasn't sure if I was going to have gas so we can get here, right? And I'm sure you guys all thought about that as well. I know in North Carolina it was really bad. We had about 75% of the gas stations didn't have gas. I know it was bad here in Georgia too. So, you know, the impact sometimes of these cybersecurity and this critical infrastructure sometimes is not apparent to people until it starts really impacting the types of things that they can do in their daily lives. And so I think that's an important point, is that a lot of these different attacks sometimes can be masked because it doesn't have a direct impact on what they're doing. So I wanted to talk about today really three different things. The first one is just talking about the top attack vectors that these threat actors are using and why they're so widespread. Now, why are they using these particular attack vectors? You know, and phishing, coming on the heels of our talk last time about the human side, you know, that's a big attack vector where they're sending emails to folks and trying to get them to click links. And then scan and exploit, where they're simply going out there and looking what infrastructure is available on the internet, or what can I get access to quickly and easily, and they can automate that. So we're going to talk about that. And my presentation, attack surface, is just, if you're not familiar with that term, it's just a way that a surface, an area of an endpoint that someone can get access to, a threat actor can get access to, and then target your organization. It could be a website, it could be internal. It could also be something that you're not really thinking about. I know we talked about in the other session, some of the embedded devices, Internet of Things type devices. The second part is I want to talk about why organizations struggle. What is the real reason behind some of this stuff? And this is some of the things I've talked to different companies about. And then how you can go about implementing a zero trust strategy to help protect you and your organization. So I pulled this from an IBM report, and it talks about the top attack vectors. And we all know from the pipeline that ransomware is the top attack vector. And I think it was around 65% between ransomware and phishing were the top attack vectors. And then why are they doing this? Because they only need a couple bucks, $10 to buy a server and go out there and start doing these attacks. So it's cheap, it's easy, and it's highly profitable, right? And so it provides all the incentive for people to need threat actors. And then you have nation-state actors and other people that are specifically focused on getting into infrastructure. So you've got these different levels as well, not just just people trying to make money, but now intentionally trying to get information to use against us or use in the long run to gain an advantage. So what makes these so effective, right? It's because, really it's easy. It's easy to scale and automate, and it doesn't take a lot of coding or development time to go out and start these attacks. And they can scan for vulnerabilities 24/7. So if you have a piece of infrastructure that has a vulnerability that they find, they can just continue and, even if you patch it, they can come back for the next vulnerability and find it. Vulnerabilities are widespread and growing. I mean, there's not a day goes by where there's not some vulnerability in Exchange or some other tool, right, that organizations are using, SolarWinds. And then if we go back to the human aspect of this, is that now with social media and LinkedIn, they can easily target information to find specific individuals or groups, and now they can use a phishing campaign to to get to. And so they can really now go from this wide scan and exploit to specific spear phishing campaigns where they can now attack certain people. And one of the things that we've worked with our partners and government organizations is that these vulnerabilities exist across industries, right? It's not just maybe a healthcare vulnerability. They might find those vulnerabilities in healthcare because they're the easiest, but really you have to be focused on how does these vulnerabilities exist across all these different organizations, like Exchange, right? That could be any type of organization. So just think about that as you're thinking about these attack vectors. And the other piece too is that these actors can scan. Once they release a vulnerability, it can take them 15 minutes to start scanning for that vulnerability. So this is a constant pressure on organizations to keep up with all these different attacks. So how does that relate back to critical infrastructure? I wanted to talk about, we think about critical systems differently, and it really depends on the organization. But, the pipeline has showed us that, it not only affected their billing system, which is really a business system, and that in turn also impacted their critical pipeline system, right? So you have to think about these things as correlated. Sometimes these different networks come together at a junction, or other times they're separate, but there's still a relationship sometimes between those that might not be apparent just from an IT level. You have to think about it as well from a business level. And then with the pandemic, everyone needed to be remote, now all this data has to be accessible by remote computer, remote access to it. And so now these critical infrastructure, some of the pieces are starting to move out to the edge, out to where users can access it. So it represents a point of vulnerability. And then you also have to think about what types of software you use within your organization, whether it be third party or legacy, and the types of vulnerabilities that they have that maybe you can't control at all. So you can see as you kind of go through a plan to look at your organization and to look at the infrastructure, that all these pieces play a part in how you evaluate your threat surface and what the attacker can target. So I think we can do better. We can do better, right? There's solutions out there to help us. So here it is, right? You guys got it. Just go do all these things, right? I'm not really picking on these documents because these are really good, but you can see there's just a laundry list of stuff that organizations have to keep up with. And these are really good documents to do that, but the top one I've kind of highlighted in both documents is security patching, right? Which it's just a constant thing. And so I want to talk about in the next section is how organizations not able to keep up with that. Why can't it? Sounds easy, right? Just go patch your systems and you'll be fine, but it's much more than that. So why are they struggling to keep up? It comes down to the budget and resources, right? There's only so many cybersecurity or IT people in their team. How can they best prioritize these resources to patch systems, to prioritize the most important things that they need to secure? And then time. It takes time to do this. You have to identify the vulnerability, which is sometimes a huge issue, right? If you don't know about the vulnerability or the patch, how do you know to go fix it? Review it, test, and deploy it. And that ties back in too with critical systems, right? Some types of systems, like your email, you can't have it down for a long period of time. So you have to prioritize these fixes in the chain. And so those are two big things that we see organizations struggle with when they have a list of things like I showed up there before. We talked about the remote workers in COVID, being able to access those systems from the internet. The other big piece when we work with healthcare companies is they have a lot of IoT devices on their network, and sometimes they don't even know that these pumps and these other equipment exist on their network. So it's not about just patching them, it's about understanding that they're even there to begin with. And then you have to track it. And that can become overwhelming. Some of the organizations you work with, they did a scan, they identified hundreds of devices with vulnerabilities. Now you have even more work to add to your plate, right, to go fix those vulnerabilities. We talked a little bit about business priorities, where these critical systems, we need them 24/7. When's the right time to take them offline or prioritize legacy fixes? And then growth in the cloud as we move these to hosted servers. Think about how much we rely on Salesforce or other tools in the cloud, Office 365, right, where we're moving our data to the cloud and entrusting a third party to handle it and secure it, right? So it just represents another vulnerability point within an organization. So now I just want to talk a little bit about what Zero Trust is, some of the tenets, and then how it can help us solve some of these problems that we've been discussing. So the idea for Zero Trust is never trust, always verify, right? So if you're on a VPN and you can go access, 3 applications and a shared data drive, you're only trusted you're only accessing the VPN, you're not necessarily trusted for each of those specific things, right? And so the idea is that you want to put up an access credential for each of those things, so that person has to verify, yes, I'm the user that has access into that specific resources, and they can get in. You treat your internal networks like the internet, where think about anyone could come in and access that. You want to protect it. You want to make it so that not everyone can see it and move laterally within your network. Assume breach, right? You don't just think about from a defensive posture. Think about from an offense. What happens if someone gets into your network? And I know in the other presentations they were talking about this, is that you need to have a plan, right? When people get in your network, how are you going to respond? How can you segment network resources so that only those people with least privileged access can get to them? One of the big things for VirnetX technology is we remove the application visibility from the internet. So what does that mean? That means a resource that you might go to on the internet, a web page, a database, something like that. We actually take that off the internet so that no one else can see it except for those authorized participants in the service. And so that way you're not getting all this traffic from hackers and third parties that they just go out there and scan and find these services. And then end-to-end encryption of all your network communications. That's really a foundational component to Zero Trust, and I think just a security strategy in general, that we're securing and encrypting data as we move it around. So one of the things when we think about breach is that when we get into ransomware and data theft, what the attackers are trying to do is get a toehold into the system, and then they're trying to move into other systems, right? And that's where you see that they're in the network for hundreds of days, right? They're trying to gradually get to the most critical, important infrastructure data, or they just want to pull everything out and use it for intelligence collection, right? So Zero Trust allows us to limit individuals just access to the data that they need. So they're not having access to things outside that if they get compromised, it could reveal that data. So I just want to talk a little bit about how some of these Zero Trust strategies impact an organization, and then some of the ways that VirnetX helps. I'll just cover this at a high level. So users and devices, your particular device, has to be by default untrusted, right? And what VirnetX does is we have a certificate that we put down on your device that correlates that device and user together, so that we know when you access a specific resource or a specific device, it gives you access into that infrastructure, and then you're still authenticating that you have access to the application. So it's a multi-strategy approach, a tiered approach, a layered approach to security that allows you more control. And that goes into one of the points of network segmentation is some of our patented technology allows us to create what we call a secure domain. And you can just think of that as a network segment where only the users and data, we call it a resource, but it could be data, it could be an application, are just accessible in that one domain. So if there's a breach, you can close it off. If there's a compromise of the device, you can just remove that device from that specific network or all the ones that are associated with it. So it's a way for you to compartmentalize data across your organization. And then, like I said before, we have some technology as part of our patents that allows us to remove applications and services from the public internet. And that's a huge selling point for our technology is we're able to isolate it so you can only allow specific users into that. It could be applications, it could be databases. We support any kind of underlying communication since we're operating at the network level. So just some of the benefits as you think about Zero Trust, reduced attack surface. One of the things to think about too, I think was on one of my first slides, is that misconfigurations is also a fairly big vulnerability point, right? And so if you're removing these applications, these services from the internet, you're reducing that attack surface that threat actors can find that data. You're allowing trusted access now with our certificates. You can choose who gets access to different things, and it can be dynamic and create policies around that. as your organization changes, you can do that. And then security at scale. We operate in the cloud, so we're able to really scale this technology out. And we want to make it easy to use, right? So Zero Trust can be implemented for legacy applications and services, and really from an end user perspective, there's not a lot of changes for using the application. It's transparent to the user. So I just want to leave you with a couple things to think about as you consider Zero Trust and think about how this might impact your organization. Just think about never trust, always verify, right? I mean, there's a lot of solutions out there. There's different components to part of your strategy, where it's like an identity management solution or some of the things we're doing at VirnetX. There's different ways that you can implement within your organization, even if you just reduce the policies of who could have access to specific data. And then assume breach. Make sure you're monitoring your network and your infrastructure. Have a plan and understand how attackers can move laterally within your network. So make sure you're identifying and protecting those critical resources at a minimum, right? And then use multi-factor authentication, right? I think a lot of people have gone to that. So definitely start using that if you're not. That can just provide a nice layer of protection, even if you're not able to implement a lot of these other things right now. So thanks a lot. Appreciate the opportunity.